Now, Hoffman, we know, has been in charge. He's been in the post at the Premier League, the chairman of the Premier League, for just 18 months. He's emerged as something of the, how would you describe it, scapegoat for the criticism levelled by a number of clubs for the Premier League's handling of the Newcastle controversy. Yeah. And now we understand that his imminent resignation is on the cards. Now, how can this be?
I don't blame him.
Pressure from where's it coming from? Pressure from the big six who don't want a new kid on the block with similar, with bigger wealth than anybody.
I don't blame him, Gary Hoffman. There's a den of vipers. You know, you've got a league that was commissioned, and Bruce Buck was head up as part of the initiative to recruit the new chairman for the Premier League. And if you remember, the Discovery Channel lady that was going to take over changed her mind once she realised what the remit was, which is basically to work for the big six. You know, you had the head of Guardian that ultimately fell on his sword because of inappropriate text messages that was going to take the job. But what you've got here now is the Premier League. Normally, the roles have been changed. Richard Scudamore was head cook and bottle washer. And there's a division of power now. The chairman goes in there. He doesn't... But whereas Scudamore was chairman and chief executive, you've now got Richard Masters making all the commercial decisions and Gary Hoffman being the grey hair, counselling and supporting and guiding, right? So you look at this and say, what happened with the Newcastle situation? Well, it seems other leagues would be quite happy to have this ownership model because we just had the Italian leagues piping up and saying that they should have bought an Italian club, right? So why is it good enough for buying Inter Milan, but it isn't apparently good enough for buying Newcastle? I tell you why it's not good enough for buying Newcastle, because it brings a powerhouse into the division that the other six clubs that have influence, that we've seen how they act, we've seen their modus operandi, we saw it in all its glory for the European Super League, suggesting that this is something they're not comfortable with. If you look at what the Premier League's modus operandi was, what was Richard Scudamore's biggest success? Holding together 20 egos in a room and getting them more money every time there's a deal, right?
Yeah.
Getting them more money every time there's a deal. He's got more money. Gary Hoffman's presided over a new contract, a new broadcasting deal, which is just about to go stellar again, because you're seeing $1.1 billion deals being done with the American broadcasters.
Yeah.
The overseas rights, which is the next bastion of finances that's going to drive the Premier League, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Scudamore's parting gift was to give a proportion of that to the top six. Not to carve it out collectively, to carve out a distribution from the overseas rights, specifically and explicitly for the top six.
So the extra funding, the percentage of extra funding goes between the top six?
The overseas rights were carved out slightly differently. And rather than have a collective distribution that's based upon a certain start point and everyone having a collective part of the pie, and then the broadcast, however many games you get and how high up the table are your differentiation, we understand that. But when it came to the fundamental distribution, there was a central distribution point that's been changed.
How did that change because
the big six campaigned, and Richard Scudamore handed it to them and said, "We'll put a coefficient over the top six clubs, and you'll get more of the overseas money." And everybody knew that the overseas money was going to dwarf the domestic money because Sky and BT have had enough of buying broadcast rights that they've got churn going through the ceiling. They've got their own problems. They can't keep growing that $4 or $5 billion that they were paying every 3 years to a higher level.
Right.
But the overseas rights are going up. Now go to Hoffman. Hoffman's sitting inside a situation where the Newcastle takeover was steeped. All the backstories, Jim, about who owned the club and the separation is nonsense. The reasons why Richard Masters and his guys pushed back, there was one issue on the table, it was piracy. And it was absolutely right to be there. The Saudis presided over the piracy of a signal in the Middle East, and the Premier League could not allow people to come in that basically took their signal and broadcast it for nothing. The moment the Saudis stepped away from that and said, we condemn it, that deal was waved through. Now, the argument then becomes, do you believe what the Saudis have said, which is Mohammed bin Salman, who's the head of the PIF, who's the head of the state, is a crown prince, is not indexed to a business that he's chairman of? It's laughable.
Yeah.
But by definition, they've given sworn affidavits and statements and undertakings that they are not a state. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a state owning a football club, because I believe a state owns Man City. So this argument that a state and separation needed to come in, what this is all about...
And there's an insinuation here that Man City would be one of the objectors and one of the agitators to get Hoffman out.
Well, I would imagine that Man City, I imagine that Arsenal, I would imagine that Liverpool, I would imagine Man United, I would imagine that Tottenham and Chelsea are the leading voices behind this. Because ultimately, there is a difficulty in stopping this takeover from happening. Because you could turn around and say that because they admitted piracy, and this piracy was historic, but you've got to judge people by present circumstances. So in present circumstances, you wonder if Man City, with their situation, would have got through in 2008 if the standards of 2020 were being deployed. Because the world turns and everything changes, and sometimes you can't judge today's standards by 12, 15 years ago. This is unfair.
What we do know, Simon, is that the clubs were also miffed that they found out at the same time as the media found out.
But it's a problem.
And the clubs then had a conversation amongst themselves saying, "Is what is going through? The Saudi thing's gone through."
I think
so now they're gunning for Hoffman's head.
But hold on. When I bought Crystal Palace, I don't think the Football League... I announced that I'd bought Crystal Palace before the Football League announced it.
Why doesn't that surprise us?
But my point is it's my gift. I bought a private club.
Yeah.
I bought a private business. What business is it who owns Newcastle as long as it meets Premier League rules?
Yeah, but this was an extremely contentious takeover.
Yeah, but I think
it was a contentious takeover based upon piracy.
Yeah.
And everybody in that room, every one of those 20 Premier League chairmen, put aside the real bias. The real bias was a fox in the henhouse with a big bag of money, right? But the perceived bias and the legitimate bias was piracy. The moment you took that piracy off the table, Newcastle were available to be bought, and you don't need to consult with the other 19 clubs.
So has Hoffman got an impossible job?
Yeah, I think
it would look like it.
I think it's a dreadful job. I think it's a job trying to balance. Scudamore did it well because he had a room of people, which I was one of for a period of time, where he had to balance his egos, and the thing that cleared everybody up, right, was he kept on getting everybody more money. But because that train is leaving the station and the money that they're getting isn't meeting the expectations of other opportunities, you're never going to placate this group of people that have different agendas. You're never going to placate Man City because they want to do precisely what they want to do when they want to do it, and they want to spend what they want to spend when they want to spend it. You're never going to placate other football clubs like Chelsea as well, to go to Trevor's point that he'll bring up in a minute. Don't bring Man City in without Chelsea.
Can they force them out?
Well, City Group is a privately owned company.
I think they can probably give him a vote of no confidence, yeah. We gave a vote of no confidence to Keith Harris.
But would he want the job? Would he want the job?
Who would want this job?
Exactly.
Who would want this job with this group of individuals that have a certain vantage point? It's an impossible... Gary Hoffman, believe me, is no mug. He is a very capable operator. He's an incredibly well-connected banker that's been a chairman of major businesses, both in the real time, like the digital bank Monzo, and in the historic, when you talk about Northern Shell. This guy understands the dynamics of business and commerce and how it holds together. And Richard Masters is also a decent... It wasn't so long ago, Richard Masters was an incompetent buffoon that everybody felt was an idiot, and that Newcastle fans were saying he's corrupt and biased.
And why is he not affected by this? Because he's part of the commercial side. Yeah.
Well, he's chief exec. Yeah. So he would effectively report upward into Gary Hoffman, who would oversee him as a grey hair, counselling and directing him, making sure he goes in the right direction. Okay. It's poor.
I hope he hangs on.
Who would want this job?
Yeah, I know. Incidentally, we in the media knew that you'd bought Palace before you announced it.
You didn't. You didn't because you thought Jerry Lim had bought it, because Jerry Lim did buy it and I bought it 30 seconds afterwards.
Remember, I phoned you to say, can you confirm to me that you bought Palace?
No, you didn't.
Absolute fiction, Trevor. I think you, but I'm taking him in a direction he doesn't want to go in.
I think you were a runner at the time, so I'm not sure that it was the case.
I'll be running away from you. 11:30.
Jim White and Simon Jordan, Monday to Thursday morning 10 till 1 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.